Yat ehtine masanın işle. I'm Navajo Grandma. I wanted to finish off today with a story when I was 4.5 years old, kind of going on 5. And if you know 4.5-year-old little children, they're exploring, they're fun, they're almost resilient to, I don't know, they just get into everything. I was one of those. And one day out in the reservation, I don't know if I should tell this story, but I will. My grandmother made some Navajo biscuits, and we very, very rarely had cheese. And so she gave me a slice of cheese, and I folded it with the biscuit, and I just started walking. I was enjoying it so much. I saw some little horny toads. They call him our Che, our grandfather. I kept walking and just watching him, and I didn't even know. I just kept going. Didn't really look around. And eventually, I went about maybe 5, 7 miles, not with the horny toad, but just, I was looking around and I just kept going. And came to kind of a wash where the water had run and kind of was deep, and so I thought, nah. So I backed up and then I went elsewhere. Well, I noticed there was this big ant hill, and they've got red ants in New Mexico. And when they bite you, it stings and it hurts. I didn't mind. I sat down by it and I watched them walk over my legs. And it kind of tickled. They didn't bite me. They just kind of walked over, and I enjoyed it. And I sat there for a while. I kind of wiped them off. I got up and I walked a little ways and sat down, and it was kind of like a dirt. There was, sagebrush like this and dirt all around. And I liked it because the sun, it was warm. So I sat down there. I made a little stick like this, and I started drawing. I'm sitting there, and I've got my legs spread out, okay? And I'm drawing, making little fun things. Then what I did was I started making a hole. And the hole, I thought, oh, maybe this was a snake hole because the dirt started falling down. And then it just got bigger. And the thing is, I'm helping it. And I'm thinking, whoa. And meanwhile, it's getting so big. And my eyes were like, whoa. And so then I saw 2 little wood nubs. And I could have looked at it and got up. And I jumped up away from it because when it started getting bigger. And I noticed it was a ladder. And for me, at my age, it was like, yes, it just looked an adventure. Without any thought, I crawled down on the ladder. And lo and behold, guess what I found? Right at the bottom, there was like a circle. And there were 4 people sleeping. And there were arrowheads pointing. The arrowheads were all pointing, and it was covered all on the ground around me. Well, at that point, I thought, well, these guys, and I thought, well, they're asleep. What are they doing? The sun's up. And I walked around and I looked at them, and they were not super visible, but once your eye gets adjusted, you can kind of see. And then I noticed one thing. My grandma always says, your shoes do not go like this. You always have to make them, they point inside. And I noticed all of their shoes were on backwards. All their shoes are pointing out. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I tried waking them up and nobody moved, and their whole body kind of rocked. Remember when you're little, you're just thinking, these guys are sleeping in the day. So that just made sense, and they were sleeping. Then I tried to talk to them and didn't get any response. But I noticed one thing. Their shoes were on backwards. And guess what? I decided I'm going to put them on right. Well, when I took their shoes off, their feet were skinny and leathery and just leather. Didn't even feel warm. But so what? When you're that age, you're just like, okay. I took off their shoe, and I put them on the right way so that they pointed inside. All 4 of them. Then I walked over them and I noticed each one of them had little bottles of something, and they were pottery type of things. And I went over there, and the one, I think there's 1, 2, 3. I think it was the third one to the right that I went over, and I found this pottery. It was so pretty. It was black and white. It was really beautiful. And I noticed there was clay covering the top. And so I looked around and smart, got a arrowhead, bam, 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 opened it. And first thing I smelled, when you're little, your scent is very sharp and keen. And guess what I smelled? Raisins. And I thought, yes. And I noticed the pungent smell of raisins. And there was sugar. You can see the sugar was just coated and had come to the top, I guess. And because it smelled like raisins, I put my hand down there, and sure enough, there was raisins. And I popped it in my mouth. Very good stuff. Then I looked around. I noticed there were all kinds of things around, and that didn't do anything for me. And it was kind of dark, so I didn't want to go over there. I climbed out of the ladder. I hoisted that little, my raisins. I could see my feet prints, and so I walked all the way home. As I came closer to the home, my Biji and the women were outside, and they saw me, and I'm sure I had junk, raisins all over my mouth. And I'm just happily eating, and I heard my Biji, "Ya de la," my grandma, my Biji. "Yay, ya!" Oh, you could hear, "Zada, zada." Oh, if you could hear them. These women were, and I'm like, what did I do, And I'm just holding and hanging on to my little raisins. Well, they were screaming, and I don't know why, but my grandfather, who walked on water, came, and I know he thought, oh my gosh, what do you do now? And I found out that the design on the pottery is the design for dead people. Oh my gosh. Of course, you remember, I'm totally innocent because I'm only 4.5, going on 5. And that's why my grandmother freaked out, okay? And so Grandpa pried it out of my hand. I wouldn't let him take it from me. Of course, I had a mouthful of raisins too at the time. And he came over to my mouth, and let's say here's my mouth. My grandfather yanked my mouth open with his hand and took his 2 fingers and went and ripped out my whole, he almost took my tonsils out. He cleaned my whole mouth of raisins. And I cried because it hurt. And then he had me gargle with water, clean. And oh my heavens, the cleaning I got, never had that kind of cleaning. And then I kind of wondered how come my grandmother was standing there looking around the door at me. And I thought, what is she doing? So Grandpa led me to what you call a cha'o. Now the cha'o it has tree branches on it, and it's all just made out of wood. It's a shade tree house, okay? That's where people sit in the summertime and they weave, or they, it's a shade area. And I was locked in there. I didn't know why. I couldn't understand. They took my fetching raisins, and my grandmother's peeking around the corner, and I'm thinking, what? And then I was told, you can't go out of that place. And Grandpa brought me sheepskin, about 3 or 4 of them, laid 2 down. He said, you're sleeping there, and covered me, and boom, I was, okay. And I cried because I couldn't understand what was going on. And then Grandpa finally came and asked me some questions. And heaven help me, I'm sure he probably thought, why? And I told him everything. Meanwhile, he had called the nearby shaman and the one with the strong powers to be rid of this evil I did. And so he was called in. But see, Grandpa had to discover what I did first. I remember he's sitting there like this with his hand on his head, like, oh my gosh. And I told him where I went, what I did, what I found, how I went down there and changed everybody's shoes. Oh my gosh. It was just crazy. And then I told him how I opened the jar and it was raisins. Perfect. I told him I was so happy because the first thing I opened was that. He said, did you open any other? I said, no, just that because I was hungry. So I went up and I told him I crawled up and I went home. And that's when all this crazy stuff started happening. And so I slept in the chow by myself. For a little kid, it was scary. But I knew Grandpa was there because I saw him sitting over there by the hogan. And it made me happy. Grandpa walked on water. I loved him so much, and he was there protecting me for whatever I did. So we proceeded. The next day, the shaman comes, and I explained what I did. I had to let it out. The shaman, he had made a sand painting, and I had to be butt naked. I walked in there, sat down on the thing, and he did his whatever on me, his shaman prayers and trying to get the evil out of me because what I did, changing the dead people's shoes. And it was explained to me that by putting the shoes on right, that I was asking the dead to come back. And if you have them wrong, they can't come back. Then I ate their food that they were supposed to travel with and eat on the way to the spirit world, and guess what? I was enjoying it. So I was in real deep trouble culturally and superstitionally wise. So anyways, he did the sing song, and then they covered me with coal ash. Oh, from my toes all the way. I was one black little thing. Eventually I went outside and the women had to clean me off, and I was bathed in yucca, and somehow I was forgiven of my sins. Of course, my husband told my oldest daughter that today, and she said, well, I'm not sure that all the demons left my mother. But anyways, so that is my funny story. And when you're a child, there's superstitions. Grandpa taught us things about the superstitions and having rituals and to heal us like that. But he told us to kind of keep it under wraps. That wasn't foremost. And so anyways, he prayed for me and everybody prayed for me, and I was good with Grandpa again. We went on our rides and he loved me. My grandmother finally was able to come and hold me, and she cried and cried. And that's a story of me going into something that I didn't know was wrong and doing something wrong, and the whole ritual thing I had to go through. Now I'll tell you, I think what Grandpa, his teeth was aching because he had to give the shaman, I think, like 4 or 5 sheep and goats, and I don't know if he gave him a horse, and then money. And see, shamans are they charge a lot to take demons out of a 4.5-year-old. But then Grandpa, I remember in the end, he said, you never had demons. I know you're clean. We just had to do this. And he says, how? I can't imagine a little child like you would have demons. He said, I know you didn't know what you're doing. And every now and then, Grandpa would hold me and tell me, remind me. And he promised me never to go back there. And I found out that he told me later on when I was a junior in high school, he said that that he went there to where I went, and that very day, the day after, and with the shaman, and they all climbed down there, and he says, oh my gosh, couldn't believe the shoes. They had to put the shoes, change the shoes, with the prayers and whatever, and then Grandpa left. Grandpa said he left, and he says all these trucks came, and to tell you the truth, Grandpa says he thinks they pillaged the whole place. So much for shamans. They're not always, whatever. They filled it with rocks. Grandpa said never go back there, and I've always listened to him. And it was just a story that I wanted to let you know, and it's kind of fun in a weird way and crazy in another way. Being a child, the things I learned about superstitions and shamans and what I did about death. What I want you to take from this is that you need to go home or just turn around and get a notebook and write down something you did when you were my age, 4.5 to 5 years old, that was silly, that you thought you were totally innocent, and you remember, but you were always loved, irregardless of that. So, it's good for your posterity. And mine's written now on a video. And so, I hope you had a smile. Thank you. Love you guys. Subscribe. Hang with me. So, spread the word. Navajo Grandma. Talk to you later. Hagone. Since I didn't have a visual for my story about my experience doing some naughty things culturally, here is a sketch that I sketched for you, and I'm going to move in on my little person here of me walking by myself, and on my little adventure when I was 4.5 to 5, how I managed to find this ladder that went down. Of course, I uncovered it, and then the awful results of what happened at that point. But I did find my wonderful raisins, and then this is the cha'o. This is what I sketched for you to see, basically where I was, my jail cell, and just wanted you to take a good look at it. And this is a shade area that is used for weaving or on a hot day. Sometimes people eat out there. They do their ceremonies out here too. So I hope you have a good vision, just a little better vision of what I went through, since that was many years ago. Wonderful. And here is the whole thing. I hope you enjoyed my sketch. And this is Navajo Grandma 10-4.